Welcome to Between Two Lances. I believe we're on episode 3, and we have Emily Stone here. Hi, Emily.
Hi, Andrea.
And we're going to talk about lots of stuff, some repeated questions, some new questions. But I'm really excited because Emily and I don't know each other very well, and I feel like we're about to know each other really well, which will be really fun because I noticed from stuff I've read that she's written that she's really cool. And I'm secretly hoping we become friends after this. Not really secretly, but I feel like it could happen. Fingers crossed. So what's your current contract job situation?
Sure. So right now I'm coming down into a lull, which as a freelancer is very scary. But it's also going to be the first week of school for the kids and maybe a good time to not be crazy busy at work. I'm actually wrapping up a project with Apple, which is fantastic. That's been such a good experience. And then I also, this summer, I was teaching at Michigan State. I was teaching the faculty how to teach online because everybody has to convert their courses to be online for the fall. So I was kind of juggling the Apple project and the online teaching this summer. But now, like I said, I'm ramping down. I'm starting to sort of bid on projects and think about what I want to take on next.
Wow, that sounds really busy and crazy. And how long was the project? How long was the contract for?
The Apple one, I've been on it since, I want to say March or April. So it was a bigger project converting an in-person, like a normal in-person training to be completely e-learning, so people can take it from their computer.
And it's okay if you're not allowed to tell me the details of any of this, but I'm
not sure how much I can say about that one. That's because it's an indirect client. So it's like someone else hired me. And then Apple is their client. Cool. So I don't want to say too much, but I just do want to say that I was able to take really technical content and sort of use a narrative and characters to drive it, which I think for super technical content is not always the norm. And it's been really enjoyable. And it just shows that, you can be creative with any sort of content, and everybody needs story. Everybody learns better when there's some sort of story or narrative or character that you can kind of hang on to get through the training.
Yeah, definitely. And I always like to ask more specific questions about things like that because I feel like when someone is, even if they're doing ID work full time, or if they're thinking about getting it, or if they got a degree, right, but they want to start freelancing even while they're in school and figure all that out. One thing that I was always wondering before I actually took on stuff was, what are the projects actually like? What are you doing? Are you writing things from scratch? What kind of material are you actually given? How, because sometimes, and the answer is always it depends on the project. It depends on the client. So getting real world examples is, even just what you said, the high level of it is super, super interesting and helpful. And that can be really intimidating as someone who's starting out because you want to take on stuff and put yourself out there. But then there's that thing in the back of your mind that's will I actually be able to do it? Because I don't really know what I'm supposed I don't know until I start it what I'm actually going to do.
I would say in the majority of cases, you're usually at least given some sort of PowerPoint. It seems like people always start from a place of, well, we have this PowerPoint that covers a lot of the stuff you're going to need to know. But I think the most valuable thing is when you have a relationship with the client and the subject matter experts, if you're having weekly meetings or if they're super responsive to your emails, you can always get more content. You can always get your questions answered. So the scary thing is when they just send you 7 PowerPoints. They're could you just create a course or something? And you're well, I'm going to have some follow-up questions to this. So I would say if you have a good relationship with the client and the subject matter expert, it doesn't really matter at the beginning if you're not super clear on things, because you have an opportunity to keep learning about the project.
That's a really good point. And I think when people are taking on projects, especially when they're new, you kind of have this all or nothing mindset where you're oh crap, I don't know what I'm doing right in the beginning. So I might never know, and then I shouldn't take it on. But you're right. That's a good reminder is you're working with people usually, and you can ask them questions. They're not a single page document that you can't get anything more from.
You should always be, checking in with them. Is this what you were picturing? Is this what you guys were hoping for?
How long have you been freelancing?
That is a good question. I think it's been 5 years. It's 5 years this August. I was a stay-at-home mom with an infant and a toddler at the time. And in my pre-mom life, I had done instructional design and instructional technology consulting in the Chicago area. And I was playing catch with a toddler and trying to keep an infant happy. And I got an email from someone I worked with in Chicago, and he said, hey, we're hiring freelance IDs, just seeing if you're interested. And I was like, well, wait a minute, you're going to pay me to do this work from my house. I could do it when my kids are sleeping. Like, tell me more about this thing. And so I started working with one company, and then I reached out and found out you found another company. And basically through 2 companies for over the past 5 years, that's kept a pretty steady workflow. And then I found like random things on my own here or there. So I've mostly done the indirect thing, but through that, those agencies are able to reach out to these bigger clients that I'm not going to walk into Uber's San Francisco office and be like, hey guys, do you need an instructional designer? But through one of these companies, I've been able to work with Uber. So I would say it's, leveraging my relationships that before kids, and then kind of building on that, I've been able to keep a pretty steady workflow for about 5 years.
Do you have any tips for people who are juggling multiple children and freelancing?
I would say like get a nap schedule down, because honestly, I schedule a lot of my client calls between like 1 and 2:30 p.m. because that's like a pretty standard nap time. And my older kids can play Minecraft during that time. So it's like, if I need a synchronous time, I would say, or, the alternative would be schedule childcare at least 1 day a week. So I usually have it about 3 days a week. And it's like, if I'm going to schedule things, I'm going to do it on a day that I have childcare. And then the days I don't, like you're saying, you can go to the park in the morning. And then when they are napping, you work on your work. And then if you need to put in another hour after they go to bed, like you do, but you're not stressed that a baby's crying while you're typing in a Word document, like nobody cares.
Once I realized that there were possibilities and I could do that, it made me feel a lot better, because I was really stressed out about balancing everything and all that. So this is a good segue into the next question I was going to ask is, what is your daily or weekly schedule like as a freelancer? Do you keep it really, really consistent, or do you have some wiggle room?
I find for myself, I can get probably like 5 hours of really good work done. Like if I send the kids away for the day, like during the daytime, I can do probably like 5 or 6 good hours of work. And then if I need any more than that, I'm doing like an hour after bedtime, just because I am home and I am a mom. So it's like, I'm also doing laundry and planning the meals. And, so I don't keep myself to a 9 to 5, but for my personality, that works. On the flip side, it might be the weekend. And like, since I didn't get something done during the week, I'm spending Sunday night, doing what I need to do before Monday morning. But like I said, with the scheduling childcare, if I know I'm paying for the kids to be gone on Monday, like I'm going to get stuff done Monday.
What's your biggest accomplishment as a freelancer?
Sure. I think, anytime you're invited back by the same people and for something like bigger and more important, that means like you killed it the first time. They could go out and choose anybody in the world and they're like, no, she did such a good job on this. Like we need to give her something even more challenging. Like we trust her to do something more challenging. And that's happened to me, like with the Apple project. I've been with, the contracting company for a while, and you don't send like just anybody to go talk to Apple engineers and wow them. Like you pick someone who is going to like wow them. And so just to have that honor. And then the same with Uber, like I completed one project for them, and then they were like, we have something different that we need help with. Is Emily available? Like that's what a compliment. You could ask for anybody, you could go anywhere, and you came back to me because you loved my work so much the first time. To me, I'm so proud of that.
Yeah, of course. It's a good feeling, and it's a huge deal. And it almost takes that stress of, how am I going to find my next work? Because I've realized that like things kind of roll. Like once you get a good working relationship or a reputation, or you feel really good about a project, I don't know if it's like because you've entered positivity into the world, and it's the relationships you build, but like things kind of roll from there, and you're able to get into some kind of flow with different projects. Do you have any advice for people who want to work for agencies? Like how to find them, how to maintain a good relationship, or anything like that?
That's a good question, because I was so lucky that mine fell into my lap through a previous, someone I had worked with. And then same with the second company, someone I had worked with previously was there. So I would say leverage your existing connections. LinkedIn is great for that. Maybe someone you worked with is not an instructional designer, but they are connected to one or something like that. And I know, I think it's hard because I don't know how much is actually posted on the internet. When you search instructional design freelance, there definitely are things. But I feel like there's a ton hidden behind the scenes. And so I think leveraging your network is a better way to find those kinds of opportunities. It's not just about keeping relationships with like the people who actually hire you. If you're on a team with other people, keep those relationships going because you don't know what they're doing next. And whoever they're working with is like, hey, do you know any good instructional designers? And like, actually I do. We work together on this other project. That happens. I've definitely gotten work that way and I've given work that way. So that's big. It's like the cliche of, you should be nice to everybody you work with, no matter what their position. They could be the CEO, they could be, the maintenance worker. It's true. You never know who's going to be able to help you out in the future. So just maintain those relationships with everybody.
How do you deal with being like overwhelmed with work that people are asking you to do?
Well, so it's funny because right before things went crazy in March, I was about to take on a big project and I started talking to people who I was going to bring on to help me with it. And I was honestly figuring out the logistics of how that works. Like, I don't want to issue 1099s to other people, but if it comes to that, I can. I'd almost rather the client take on the burden of, issuing the 1099s to everybody. But I was honestly trying to figure that out. And then the world went crazy and the client lost all of their revenue for the foreseeable future and we didn't have that project anymore. But that's something I've definitely thought about and I'm still figuring out myself, honestly.
Yeah, because I was almost at the brink of that too, and then I figured out kind of a way to make it work. But one thing I did find is, so right now, and I will actually ask you this question next to see what your sort of business entity situation is. So right now, I'm still just a sole proprietor operating under my name and all of that. But when I was thinking about subcontracting, I realized, if I send out a 1099, they're going to have my social security number. And so I'm applying for an employee identification number, even though I'm just a person, like with their, a sole proprietorship. But that way, when you send out 1099s, your social security number is not on it and you have your employee number and it's a lot more secure. That's probably something that other people who have been in the business for a long time are like, duh, but I hadn't gotten to that point yet. So I just had that realization. I was talking to my accountant. It's so funny to say I have an accountant. But I thought maybe that would help other people. But what is your business entity situation?
Right. So I do have an LLC. And again, I formed my LLC March 10th, like the eve of the pandemic.
I'm sorry.
The project, I was like, exactly what you said. I want an employee identification number if I'm going to be employing other people. And it's also kind of a cool factor when you say like, oh, I own an LLC. It just sort of sets you up to grow. And I do, so my current client is invoicing me to my LLC. So I had to go get a business checking account to be able to cash those types of checks. And then I just like having that going forward. When I invoice to have the LLC on there, I think it looks professional. But it looks very different. Like you're saying, if you're a sole proprietor LLC, logistically, you still file taxes pretty much the same way, and it's not that big of a deal. But if you do decide to add employees in the future, then things will start to change.
Yeah, and I think it's also safer, right? So if something were to happen and you got sued or something, they can only take the business's stuff. They can't take your personal belongings, I think, right? Yeah. It's like a limited liability.
Exactly. Thing. And I think it's a little funny with instructional design. I'm like, are you going to assume it like a bridge can't collapse because like I misspelled a word? But I mean, I'm being a little facetious there. I think in our line of work, it's not like the same as being a dentist or, something or a lawyer, but it's nice to have.
Yeah. And you never know. What if nobody catches an error in the training and it tells somebody the wrong order to do some medical procedure?
That's true.
Which is not funny, but hopefully people would check that, because then also maybe
that's why we have review cycle upon review cycle. But yes.
Is there anything that you really want to get out there in terms of um, advice or words of wisdom or anything for people who are new to freelancing and instructional design?
Yeah, I have a couple things. First is what we were just alluding to is do your research about how 1099 works, how you need to pay quarterly taxes, how to calculate that, well, at least estimate it, how you pay that. And then like every time you get a check, I set aside 20% for taxes. That's just kind of what it comes out for me, state and federal and all that. I think at the end of the day, I end up paying out about 20%. So anyway, I just to try to separate that out because when September 15th comes and you owe $4,000 or whatever it is, if you haven't been setting that aside, that's going to feel really painful because you thought you had that $4,000 in your checking account to like spend on shoes or whatever you wanted to do. And it's just weird. If you've always been W-2 and you've never had to think about that, it's a huge mental shift and like financial shift. So that like the logistics of the accounting, number one. Number two is really think about your portfolio. So every time you do a project, usually it's pretty confidential and you sign an NDR and like you can't show off what you did because it lives on the internal LMS of some company and you can't put that on your portfolio. That said, jot down what were the challenges, you know, what was the solution, what were you most proud of, like what can you tell us about it? So like keep track of all that. I've done what, like 50 projects and it's so hard for me to remember like everything I did and it'd be nice to have that catalog somewhere. And then if you don't have anything to put in your portfolio, create something. So what are you passionate about? Create a little mini course on that and showcase like that you know how to make a little animation or you're good at organizing you know, lessons in your content. You're good at coming up with clever titles for your lessons and don't feel hamstrung by the fact that you can't showcase your actual work that you've done for clients. Just make something kind of similar that you can show off. And I'm do as I say, not as I do. I'm still doing this. I'm still like, you know, my portfolio is under construction as all of ours always is, but I'm trying to take my own advice and really beef up my online presence with the things that I can showcase because I have so much that I can't really put in there.
Yep, same here. Do as I say, not as I do. Like I've got something, but I've always yeah, my portfolio does need work and I'm like you said, it's just yet at the same time I feel like we need to give ourselves credit because at one point we didn't even have one, right? And now we have one and it's a good sign that we're probably both busy where we haven't been able to make it as perfect as possible,
Right.
but it should always kind of be in the back of your mind of keeping a log of what you're doing, making notes of what you can put in there and what you can't put in there,
Mm-hmm.
and figuring out how to be creative about that. And then sometimes for one client project I had is I totally thought I would never be able to put anything of theirs in my portfolio. And then it just asked. And they told me specifically what I could put in there and it really helped a lot. And it's a piece in there that people are like, oh, that's really cool. If I didn't ask, I wouldn't have known that I could even put it in there.
You're right. If most of your life is spent actually doing ID work and not building up your portfolio of ID work to show people, that's probably also a good thing. Like what do they say? You know, focus most of your efforts on revenue generating activities. Well, changing the font on your portfolio 20 times is not going to generate any new revenue. But you know, sending a pitch email to somebody you'd love to work with, like that could generate revenue. So I think you're exactly right there.
Well, might be the first time I've ever been told I was exactly right. So I'm going to savor that moment.
You can quote me.
That's going to go on my portfolio.
There you go.
You are exactly right. Emily Stone. What are 3 things that you wish you knew before you became a freelancer? What would have made your journey easier?
Yeah, well, one is just mindset and realizing that there's going to be peaks and valleys. And so like when you're in a peak and you're like bringing in that cash because you're on this project that is 40 hours a week and they're paying you every week, save some of that money because the next 3 months you have no idea what's going to happen. So it's, again, like if you're used to W-2, you would never think about that. You would just think like, this is what I'm going to be making every week. So definitely like the peaks and valleys in the income is important. All the tax stuff, like I was alluding to before, it's just, I probably should have gotten an accountant. I'm too proud I'm like, I can figure out this tech stuff by myself. So either do the research yourself and figure it out, or, you know, I'm like, just hire an accountant for once. And then all the networking stuff, which I kind of already knew, but it's just become so much more obvious that you get work through relationships. And I was just explaining this to my little cousin. He was going to maybe get a job through like someone his dad knew. And he's like, oh, that's nepotism. Like, I shouldn't be doing it that way. I was like, that is how the world works. You leverage your relationships to get new opportunities. And then when you're in a position to pay it forward, you do. And then the world goes around. So it's all about the networking and relationships.
Yeah. And I think the pay it forward part is really important, especially with the way everything in the whole world is now. Like, that's something that is becoming more and more crucial to just surviving and feeling good about the world, is when you get in that position to give back and to pay it forward and to give maybe someone who you know is good but might not have as big of a career as you, and give them stuff, because we all have to look out for each other because nobody else is.
That's the other thing I want to say about freelance. I forgot. No one is watching out for your professional growth except you. If you work at a good company and you have good leadership, they're like making sure you take on new challenges, and they're sending you to conferences and like entering you into awards for your project and like mentoring you and all this stuff. When you're freelance, that is all on you to figure out like, what should I do next? Where should I grow? How should I grow? And just be ready for that. Because if you're not ready to take on that responsibility, you might be happier with in a more traditional company with somebody with an HR department, basically.
Yeah, if you are working at an organization that does that for you right now, and you want to be a freelancer, leverage that now while you're there, and keep an eye forward for like, well, how can I reference this later in my freelance career? What can I do now with all of the support that's going to help me later too? What's your dream gig?
So I mentioned to you before that I just started a podcast called Spilling the Milk, and it's where moms share their stories of breastfeeding, and we just sort of have the conversation, because I feel like we're not really having this conversation about how it can be challenging and how people are going through the exact same thing you went through, and you just had no idea. You thought it was like only your problem. Mm-hmm. I'm loving it. I'm learning so much. And I feel like there's a ton of opportunity in this space. So I am also going to create an online course for new moms to better prepare them for the realities of breastfeeding. And then that makes me think, like, what other courses do we need in that space? Like, maybe a better course on how babies are supposed to sleep, or, how to take care of a toddler and a baby at the same time. So maybe I will create a by moms for moms content empire and take over the world that way. So that's one thing that I'm thinking about recently.
You need to do that. And I wish that it existed already. And I can't believe it's not. You're so right. It just doesn't, that's not a thing.
Like, I know so many other moms that have these awesome expertise that they could share with other people. And it's like, if I could provide that platform and sort of coach them on, how you would make a course out of that, or like learning experience, then they get to have a voice and share what they're really good at with other people. Like, everyone is a subject matter expert at something. So to help people realize that and like share it with the world, that would be a pretty cool day job.
Yeah. And when you start that, I would like to know as much about it as possible, because I wish that I had information up front, or some sort of FYI, mom, that when you stop nursing, that your hormones get all crazy. And I had some like really dark, scary thoughts and things happen. And like, I was afraid to leave my house. I was afraid to bring additionally to just leaving the house, I was afraid to like bring my daughter to the grocery store and be putting her in the car seat, and worried someone's going to come up behind me and like shoot me.
And you do wonder, you're like, so are all the other moms walking around with these exact same thoughts, and they're just not like also telling me about it? Or am I literally the only one? And is this sustainable for the next 18 plus years to have these thoughts? Because it's probably not sustainable.
But anyway, that was just all to say, like, that is such a good idea. And I feel like you're a really great person to do that. And I need to listen to I'm not a podcast listener, but I need to listen.
We were friends. We were friends. And then you were like, I don't listen to podcasts. And I'm like, I don't know if we can be friends.
But my issue is, I'm starting to realize when I could. That was my whole thing, is like, I don't even know when I would. Okay. I barely even listen to music.
You need AirPods.
Okay.
Your daughter thinks you're playing Barbies and you're actually listening to a podcast. It is life-changing.
I've never thought of that.
Yeah. Or you're doing dishes or whatever, and you're hearing grown-ups talk to you and not just kids. So it's a game changer.
I'm not exaggerating for a fact. Like, I have never thought of that.
Until you
Anytime I, anytime I've ever listened to anything, it's usually like on like speakers or something. And then if she's watching TV, it kind of gets in the way or something. Or if we just have, oh, now I get why AirPods exist. Listening to, yeah, I feel like if you're listening to a podcast, you can still play because it's people talking and there's gaps and stuff. You can still be aware as opposed to like blasting music, right?
right.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Well, now you're going to go down the rabbit hole of like all the podcasts you want to listen to, but it's a good problem to have. I'm excited.
Yeah, I think podcasts and audiobooks. I just started listening to audiobooks. I'm like very much I want to be sitting in like a comfy chair and reading or being outside. But I've realized that when I walk, I'd rather listen to an audiobook than music because I get all caught up. I love music so much to the point that like I almost barely listen to it because I can never choose what I want to listen to. And then if something's playing, I'm like, oh, but what about that other thing? And then I never end up listening because I'm too obsessed with putting the right thing on.
That sounds like me and Netflix. Basically, every night I watch Netflix, which means I go through the menu and never actually make a decision. And after 30 minutes, I go to bed. Or I watch Schitt's Creek. That's the only thing that can keep my attention right now is I'm loving Schitt's Creek, but I'm almost to the end and I don't want it to be over.
Okay, we can definitely be friends then. What's the most difficult part about being an ID freelancer and you can't say taxes?
Yeah, I think it is like I was alluding to before, the professional growth. And like when you do a really good job on a project, it's not like, oh, we're going to promote you now. It's sort of like, cool, move on to your next project and also do it.
What's your favorite curse word that's not a curse word?
Absolutely. Shut the front door. A la Stacy and Clinton from What Not to Wear. They would like walk out in their brand new outfit and she'd always be like, shut the front door. And that was like the best compliment you could get.
I love that show and I have never, I feel like I've always watched it by myself and never talked to anybody else about it, but I watched it all the time.
How is it not on Netflix or Hulu? Like, I don't think I've been able to find it to stream. Whoever owns that IP, like, should be making a lot more money right now because I would watch it if it was on Netflix.
Mm-hmm. It's a crime.
I don't know what they're doing.
I don't know. And Clinton, I love them both. And I always wondered, like, what would they say to me? And then I kind of want to know, but I kind of don't want to know.
They would say this. They had the same advice for everyone. I mean, they basically put everyone in about the same outfit at the end of the day. But they always looked really good.
Yeah, dress for your body type, which apparently everybody is they would put them in the same things. And yeah. Although they probably tried to put me in heels or something.
That was where I would draw the line too. It's like, yeah, for my reveal on camera, I'll wear high heels, but like in my normal life, I'm not wearing heels. So
no. And I have like, this is TMI if we put this on LinkedIn or our website, but my feet are like Bart Simpson's head. They're like wide and they just look like, and like they're not you put them in a heel and it's like they're crying.
That would be distracting. Yeah, don't do it.
Yeah. Just slap me in a pair of Tevas. Well, I think those are all my questions. Thank you for being awesome and answering everything and giving lots of good advice. And I think I'm officially going to write you down in my friend book. And I'm excited about that.
Thank you so much for starting this organization. And I just take it for granted, everything that I know. But thinking back, if I was just starting out, I would have no idea what I was doing. And I wish something like this existed when I was starting out in some sort of a community, because it can feel kind of isolating when you're, working from home and sort of advocating for yourself all the time. This is fantastic. I still have to dive into more of the modules and become more active, but I'm glad to be a part of it.